Rebecca, dinner!
I shouted at the back door at my daughter. She was just a tiny black silhouette beneath the bare trees at the end of the yard. It was the second time I'd called her, and she still hadn't moved.
I'm going to count to 3, Rebecca.
I yelled again.
That's 1. That's 2.
She always ran to me before I counted to 3. Always. But not that night. It was like she'd turned to ice, suddenly more worried than angry. I jogged out across the snow toward my 5-year-old. In the porch light glow, the shadows of the forest branches stretched over her like looming, skeletal hands.
Rebecca!
I grabbed my daughter's shoulder and spun her around. She looked pale and dreamy-eyed, but she wasn't hurt. At least, not in any way that I could see.
I told you to come in for dinner. Didn't you hear me?
She shook her head.
What were you doing down here by the woods anyway? There was a backwards man,
My daughter said numbly.
What do you mean, backwards?
I asked.
You know,
Rebecca snorted.
like this.
She turned her head, arms, and feet as far around as they would go. She made a noise with her mouth that sounded an awful lot like bone snapping, then bent herself back to normal and rubbed her neck.
Ow!
My daughter groaned.
Being backwards must hurt.
At the time, I laughed about it. But later, laying sleeplessly in the blue darkness of an unfamiliar bedroom, those words came back to me with chilling clarity. It was such a nightmarish thing for a child to imagine, and it made me wonder if Rebecca was doing all right with the move. Her mother and I hadn't exactly divorced on good terms, and I'd decided that we needed a fresh start outside the city. Somewhere far away enough that if my ex got it into her drunken head to set fire to our house, drown Rebecca in the bathtub, cut my brake lines, or any of the other psychotic things she'd threatened, she might sober up or get pulled over before she reached us, if she ever got sober anymore. 2 weeks later, I'd found work in a small town and a country house about 30 minutes away that suited our needs perfectly. The place was cheap, recently renovated, with no neighbors except for woods and abandoned farmland. Everything had fallen into place so easily that it felt like fate. But had it really been the right choice for me and my daughter? I must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up in pitch darkness to an ear-splitting shriek. It was coming from Rebecca's room. I tripped over furniture and fumbled for light switches as I ran through the still unfamiliar house to my daughter's side. Throwing open the door, I found her sitting up in bed, her mouth open sickeningly wide in a scream of pure terror.
What is it, honey?
I hugged her.
What's wrong?
Rebecca didn't answer. She just kept staring over my shoulder at the black winter night outside her bedroom window.
Do you want to sleep in Papa's room tonight?
I tried again. Rebecca nodded. By the time I'd carried her down the long hallway and tucked her into bed, my daughter was fast asleep. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. I had work in just a few hours, and Rebecca would be starting at her new school. Maybe that was it, I thought, as I pulled the blankets up around my chin. Nightmares, nervousness, first day jitters. It would pass, I told myself. Of course it would. When I picked Rebecca up from school that afternoon, it seemed like it had. My daughter spent the ride home telling me about her new friends and how her teacher had a real live frog in her classroom. We had takeout for dinner, watched a movie, and were in bed before 10 o'clock. We were both exhausted from the night before, and if anything strange passed by in the darkness, it passed by unheeded. A few nights later, on my way to the bathroom for a drink, I heard voices coming from my daughter's room. It was after 2 a.m. Who could she be talking to? I tiptoed down the hallway and pressed my ear to the door.
I don't know.
Rebecca was whispering.
Papa would probably get mad if I opened the door and let a stranger into the house.
As quietly as I could, I inched the door open, but I couldn't see anything in the lightless room on the other side.
Okay, I'll tell him.
Rebecca? I asked, switching on the light. My daughter was in her pajamas, standing by the window. Who are you talking to?
The backwards man.
What are you talking about? Honey, was there someone outside your room? My daughter shrugged. My heart was racing as I ran downstairs, turned on the outside lights, and flung open the front door. Outside, a snowstorm was howling. No one should have been out in weather like that, and if they were, they wouldn't have been able to flee so quickly. Reassured, I went to check on Rebecca, but she was already snoring softly beneath the covers. Too tense to fall asleep myself, I spent the hours before dawn reading articles online about how to prevent nightmares in young children.
You look like
Terry, my boss, told me the next morning at work.
you and the kid adjusting okay to the big move?
Terry was a burly, gray-bearded engineer, as big-hearted as he was blunt. He could sniff out a lie a mile away, so I had no choice but to tell him the truth.
Not really.
I grimaced over my third cup of coffee.
Rebecca's been having bad dreams lately. Last night, she told me that there was a backwards man outside her room.
Terry's eyes narrowed.
Hey, I get that you're new, but don't joke about that. A lot of folks around here are superstitious, and even more have long memories.
What are you talking about? I asked. Terry gave my shoulder a squeeze.
Just old stories, son. Hey, you done with that inventory yet?
I shook my head and got back to work, still reeling from what Terry had said. He seemed to think that the thing from my daughter's nightmare was real. I might have forgotten all about it if I hadn't decided to hang the Christmas lights that evening after work. While carrying the ladder to the side of the house, I found something that chilled my blood. There were footprints in the snow. They were faint, but unmistakable. Bare footprints, but in reverse, with the big toe on the outside. When I climbed up to the roof beneath Rebecca's room, what I saw was even more disturbing. Large, greasy handprints pressed against my daughter's window, with the thumb where the pinky finger should have been. I climbed down from the ladder and hurried inside to check on Rebecca. I found my daughter laying on the living room carpet in front of the TV, playing with her dolls. Unnervingly, most of them seemed to have their arms, legs, and heads twisted in the wrong direction.
Was there really a man outside your window last night?
I asked, squatting down in front of my daughter.
A backwards man?
Yeah.
Rebecca didn't look up from her toys. With a shudder, I noticed that she was having one of the reversed dolls twist the limbs of another around until it, too, was facing backwards.
What did you talk about?
It was hard to keep the tremor out of my voice.
It's very important that you tell Papa the truth now, okay?
He says he's coming to visit you tonight. He says you're next.
I whipped out my phone and punched in Terry's number. I had no idea what the hell was going on, but from our conversation at work, it seemed like he might. After 2 missed calls, I left him a message and set about locking every door and window in the house. By the time I'd finished, the sun had set, and from the ominous blue-gray clouds overhead, I could tell that another winter storm was brewing. I paced the house like a caged animal. Rebecca could tell something was wrong, but I didn't have the words to express to her the dread that I was feeling. Something terrible was about to happen. I could feel it. I reminded Rebecca to warn me right away if she saw any strangers outside of the house that night. She nodded, nervous only because I was nervous. As I gave her a bath and got her ready for bed, I kept my phone close and my pistol closer. I had bought it because of some of the threats that my ex, Rebecca's mother, had made toward us, but I'd never imagined I would actually use it. I hadn't wanted Rebecca to know I had it, but I felt a lot safer with that heavy, deadly hunk of metal at my side. Outside, the wind howled. I sat in an armchair beside the bed watching Rebecca snooze, the pistol in one hand, a glass of whiskey in the other. Frightened as I was, the tension of the day had left me exhausted. Every time I nodded off, I snapped back awake, sure that I heard something something like long, inverted fingernails scratching the window, or inhuman footsteps on the roof above our heads. Maybe that's why, when the closet door creaked open, I wasn't sure the sound was real. Not until a pale, twisted hand reached around the top of the door frame. I had been so worried about the backwards man breaking into the house, I hadn't considered the possibility that he might already be inside. I grabbed Rebecca, clamping a hand over her mouth and pulling her under the bed beside me. Her sleepy eyes widened as the backwards man emerged from the closet. He crawled upside down across the ceiling, the bones in his reversed spine snapping as he twisted his head left and right, searching for us. He skittered down the wall, running his fingers across my bed sheets in search of limbs to bend and necks to snap. A painfully loud buzzing, a ringtone. My phone! Terry was finally calling me back at the worst possible time. With an inhuman moan, the backwards man dropped to all fours in front of us, his horrific upside-down face just inches from mine. He had found us, but this time I was ready. I fired. The noise was deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet did its job. It connected with the backwards man's shoulder, knocking his arm away just seconds before those awful fingers wrapped around my skull. My second and third shots took him in the chest, knocking him to the floor. Black fumes, like smoke, or maybe spores, leaked from the holes in his naked flesh. Any normal person would be dead or dying, but the backwards man pushed his warped body back up from the floor and prepared to lunge at us again. I emptied what was left of the magazine into him, but it didn't seem to make any difference. I would have run screaming, or maybe passed out from fear, if it weren't for my daughter's high-pitched shrieks. I had to protect her, no matter what. I leapt at the backwards man, swinging my empty pistol like a hammer at that grotesque face. Those black fumes were all over me now, covering my clothes, face, and hands with a disgusting oily film, but I didn't care. I didn't stop until the twisted thing in front of me was still. When it was all over, I leaned back against the wall, panting. Apart from the winter storm raging outside and Rebecca's muffled crying, the house was silent. With a shaking hand, I reached out for my phone to see what Terry had to tell me. As I hit play, I stared at the backward man's corpse, still grotesque even in death. And yet, his limbs seemed to be righting themselves, snapping back into position, to the point that I could almost imagine the ordinary human being that at one time he might have been. I wondered whether it was some side effect of rigor mortis. Then Terry's message finally began to play.
Hey man, sorry I missed your calls. I got tangled up at work and, well, that isn't important now. If what you're telling me is true, and not just some bad joke, you and your family have got to get out of there, now. Don't try to hide, don't try to fight, just run. I know it sounds crazy, but you remember how I reacted when you mentioned the backwards man, right? Well, that reaction is pretty common in these parts. And that's because most people around here have lost friends and family to the backwards man.
My heart skipped a beat, and I wished I could rewind. Terry had recorded his message someplace with bad reception and a lot of echo. A garage, maybe. But I would have sworn he'd said, backwards men, not man. Men. If I'd heard right, it wasn't over. Rebecca and I were still in danger. I scooped up my daughter and ran downstairs to the garage. The swirling snow and ice outside the window looked lethal, but not as lethal as facing more monstrosities like the thing that I'd left on the bedroom floor, its limbs contorted like a dead spider. While I reloaded my pistol and piled winter gear into the car, Terry's message rambled on in the background.
The backwards men are easy enough to avoid, most of the time. They hate bright lights and crowds. During the day, you're not likely to run into one, unless you're skulking around in some sewer or cave or abandoned building. But at night...
The groan of the garage door drowned out whatever Terry said next. It couldn't open because it was frozen shut. Cursing, I rushed to melt the ice with hot water. If more of them were out there, I was running out of time.
No one knows where the first backwards man came from.
The recording continued.
Religious folks say it was God's punishment on some poor fool for selling his soul to the devil. Others blame some top-secret experiment gone wrong. I don't know who to believe, but I do know one thing for sure. The authorities won't do about it. They blame the disappearances on gang violence or runaway teens, and those of us who grow up here know better than to confront the backwards men ourselves.
I'd finally gotten the garage door unstuck and was readying myself to face whatever was out there in the freezing darkness. With Rebecca and our supplies locked safely in the car, I held out a shaking finger to open the garage door, then hesitated. It felt important to hear the rest of what Terry had to say.
That's what I'm telling you.
He went on.
Run! If one of them gets close to you and your daughter, don't let it get close to you, and especially don't wound it. Because whatever is creating the backwards men, it's contagious.
I looked down at my hands. The black, oily droplets that had covered them were gone. Had it been absorbed into my skin somehow? I took a step toward the car, my joints feeling tight. Thanks to the adrenaline, I hadn't noticed it before, but now it was almost like they were bending on their own, and in the wrong direction.
Papa?
My daughter's voice seemed to come from very far away. I took her out of the car and placed her on the doorstep.
Papa, what's wrong?
Becca, remember how we used to play hide and seek? I took a deep breath. I could feel the changes starting, and I knew that soon the pain would be unbearable. I need you to play hide and seek with me now, but this is going to be a special version. Papa is going to go outside, and he's going to lock the door behind him. No matter what you hear, don't tell Papa where you're hiding, and remember that this time, the game doesn't end until sunrise. I'm going to start counting now, okay? 1, 2, 3. Even with my eyes closed, I knew that Rebecca had paused to take one last look at me before running into the house. I smiled. I was glad. I wanted her to remember me like this, not like what I was going to become.